This morning we have a bit of sun, a bit of haze, a bit of a breeze, and the new Sony A7R V. I'm Amy for Wex Photo Video, and today I'm going to be putting this camera through a bunch of different tests so you can see exactly what it's capable of doing. So what are the headline specs? Well, to start off with, we know our resolution. That's what we want to see in this camera. We have got the same resolution as the A7R IV. It is 61 megapixels, but that doesn't mean the sensor hasn't had a little bit of a redesign. We've got a BSI, or a backside-illuminated XR sensor in this A7R V. We've also seen the latest processing engine, so a BIONZ XR processing unit in there, plus a new AI processing chip, which is basically there to help with deep learning, and that is going to make a massive difference to the autofocus in this camera. Got the 2470 Mark II G Master on this today, and I love this lens. It is worth noting that if you're going to use a camera like this, right, a tool can only be as good as the tools you use with it, like the chain's weakest link, terrible other metaphors that people use. Basically, it doesn't matter how good the camera is, if you're sticking a really rubbish lens on this, you will notice it because there's lots and lots of megapixels. But I have to say, if you want the best out of a camera like this, you need to be using something like the G Master range or the Zeiss range even, because it's really the only way you're going to get the best optical quality to that sensor so that the sensor can deliver you the great image. Just going to do a really professional sensor clean. Because Sony, really usefully, still don't let their shutter come down in between taking the lens off. It's mirrorless. Add that as a feature, please, for all cameras. Never been off it. The signs put me off. Okay, I like that. I think that'd be a good test of seeing how much detail we have in the pebbles. It's boring, don't get me wrong, but it's gone quite grey. But we do have a lot of detail in the pebbles. The sky's got a load of dynamic range. Good test. Now, if you're not shooting rocks or landscapes or architecture, which are all things that the R series of cameras from Sony are great at shooting, you might be shooting portraits or fashion or weddings, which are also things the R series are great at shooting. Now, we want to do a completely separate portrait shoot after this review when we get the R5 back, when there's more samples available. However, there is something I want to draw your attention to. Sony is saying that in auto exposure and auto white balance, because obviously they're the modes where the camera can give you some help, they've set this up, they've designed it so that you can get the most accurate skin tones possible. And that's thanks to that AI chip and the deep learning available. Now, I'd hope that they've obviously checked this across all skin tones. I'm sure we'll see that they have. But yeah, we definitely want to do some tests around using this for portrait, fashion, wedding, etc. in the future. Not only because of this feature, but also because of one, resolution, two, the upgraded AF, which I'll talk to you about in a bit, and also having a backside illuminated sensor as well. It's just all of that together, I think, will make it very, very nice. So if you've got any ideas of stuff you'd love us to cover in that region, make sure to stick it in the comments and we'll do our best to answer a lot of your questions in that upcoming video, which will be at some point when these become a bit more readily available. I'm very much looking forward to that test. Although this is a very nice muted light for shooting, it is a bit hazy. And we're going to head along the coast now to a little bit of a brighter patch. I've had a look at the satellite and it's looking less cloudy down that way. So we're going to head down there and I hope it clears up because I've got something a bit exciting planned for this later. So one thing you need to consider when you're shooting with a camera like this is just how big the files are. There's a lot going on, right? They're huge files, so you can fit less on a card. Your hard drives are going to fill up a lot quicker, especially as this can shoot 10 frames per second continuous as well, right? So it's worth noting the options that you have in order to just manage your memory a little bit. So in the menu system here, I can shoot, just for RAW, I can shoot RAW uncompressed, so that's like top quality. I can shoot RAW lossless compression large, RAW lossless compression medium, or RAW lossless compression small, and I can shoot RAW compressed. So I have a lot of options there. Now, if I don't need that full 60 megapixels, I can shoot the full 60 megapixels, can shoot full res, or I can shoot oversampled 60 megapixels, but full frame 26 megapixels. So my shot is only 26 megapixels, but it's quite like a high, it basically makes it better image quality without me diving into a boring scientific reason for why that is. And then you can also shoot APS-C 26 megapixels as well. So Sony have given you a lot of variability here on how to take your image, so that if you're taking a few bits for socials, it doesn't really matter about you having 60 megapixels, you don't have to use that. But if you're shooting a beautiful landscape shot and it is the nicest light and you want to shoot uncompressed, raw, best possible quality, you have that too. Just means you can manage everything a little bit better, and that is something you have to take into account because memory is expensive. Talking about memory, card slots. We have 2 of them. We've got UHS-2 SD in both slot 1 and slot 2, and we've got CF Express Type A, slot 1 and slot 2. So that doesn't give you 4 slots. You can either pick a CF Express Type A or an SD UHS-2 in each one of those slots, which is great because if you currently shoot on SD and you haven't quite got to the point where you want to buy CF Express Type A yet, you can do that, that's fine. Then you can gradually upgrade your cards as you go. CF Express Type A are a weird one, not many people use it. In fact, I think it's only Sony. It is quite expensive, but they're also nice and small, so carrying them is a lot easier than carrying loads of CF Express Type Bs. They also obviously fit into the body nice and small, and I would imagine that has a lot to do with what they can fit inside this camera. The waves have got up a little bit here, and although we're going to do an ISO test a little bit later tonight, we're going to talk about image stabilization then. This is actually a great time to see if I can handhold a little bit of image stabilization even in this wind. So I've sort of propped it against this, but the wind is still blowing a little bit, which I'm hoping the IBIS will help with. Now we've got some waves going on. I'm working at 3.2 seconds of shutter speed, and this has up to 8 stops of stabilization. So we'll see if we can get something with it and blur those waves out a bit. Right, so we're now set up to make use of that AI chip. I want to see how well this autofocuses. Basically, with the new autofocus system, not only can it figure out your body and it can see your face and things like we've seen previously on Sony models, but now that AI technology is able to recognize poses and shapes and how people move. So it's much more likely to accurately be able to track you as you move around. Now I'm going to move a little bit erratically. We've got an Atomos, we're going to set up a Ninja on here so you can see where the green dot goes and you can see how it realistically works. Talk to you about the autofocus point coverage in this camera. Now, we know there's improvements to the autofocus. I've got, well, not conflicting information, but because I'm getting this early and I'm getting the information so early, I have very early information on what's going on with the sensor here. So we know the megapixels are the same as the previous, the A7R IV. On this camera, on the new one, the 5, we've got 693 phase detection AF points, and they cover 86% of the sensor horizontally and 93% vertically, right? Whereas the R4 covered 74% horizontally, so a lot less, and 99.7 vertically, so a little bit more. But it only had 567 AF points, right? Which means it's a lot less dense. So in this camera, not only have they prioritized having a lot of dense phase AF points, but we have more of them horizontally. And I would argue that is more important because I think you have far more things coming in and out of the frame horizontally for tracking than you do vertically. And saying that, we still have 93% coverage vertically. So what we should see from this R5 is really, really great AF across pretty much the whole thing and better tracking than we see in the R4. Must be Sony videos. You can really tell it's October in Britain, can't you? Blimmin' wind all the time. Now, if you go into the subject recognition area of the AF menu, it really gives you an idea of just what that AI chip is helping us with, and that new BIONZ XR image processor. So in subject recognition, I can target a human, I can target animal slash bird, animal, bird, insect, car slash train, and aeroplane. I love that that rhymed. So it basically means, depending on where you are, those will be programmed into this, and it will allow you just in so many shooting environments to have a much more accurate tracking setup. What better way to test a 61 megapixel backside illuminated sensor from Sony than to come to Goodwood Aerodrome and take a plane straight up in the air and get some aerial shots. Now today I've booked a Super Cub, and the reason I've booked that specific plane, it's very important, is because in that plane you can open the window and you can open the door with the pilot's permission. You shouldn't just do that. And it means that I can obviously get clean aerial shots, because that's the one problem with aerial. Quite often you're shooting through a window, which obviously you might as well not bother. So, very excited about this. I think it'll be a great opportunity to see exactly what this camera is capable of. We can really zoom in, try out the crop, and I might even try and shoot a little bit of 4K and 8K video as well if it's not a bit too bumpy. Okay, so we're just test fitting in the Cub now to see what lenses I can bring in with me. So I'm thinking the 70-200 is going to be the best one to start out with. We're actually able, because it's such a nice day, to fly with this door open. So 70-200 will allow me to get past these struts, get some nice aerial shots, and then I am going to bring the 16-35 power zoom as well. I do have a little bit here, so I'm going to put the 16-35 in there, and that just gives me a bit of freedom that if I want to take something really wide, if I get the ability, I'll have to figure out as I go. But I might be able to get something in of the cockpit with the pilot Joe in there as well. So we'll just see how we go, but I'm thinking 70-200 to start with is probably going to be the best bet just to get what we need, I reckon. that was fantastic. It was a really great way to test the resolution. Now, there was a few things I noticed on the plane. Obviously, I need to look at these on a proper screen, but obviously I was zooming in and checking what I was doing whilst I was up there, because imagine if I messed that up, instant firing. Now, what I could see is that I can zoom in a huge way, right? So once I've taken the picture, obviously I can crop in loads. That's to be expected, really. It looked pretty clean. There was a slight haze. We had a pretty good day, but as you can see now, that haze was coming in all the time I was up there. So there's a bit of a haze getting near the end, but it looked pretty good. Now, most of the time I was using the FE 70-200-8, and I also had on the 16-35 f4 power zoom for a little while as well near the end there, just to get some pictures in the actual plane itself, etc. Now, I enjoyed using both of those. Both felt very balanced with the camera. This is a more beefy body than we've seen in the A7R IV before, and that's mostly because of this screen, and that came in quite handy. But there's upsides and downsides to it, right? So I love a fully articulated screen. We have the screen here, but then a lot of people, especially Sony users, want the ability to do what some of the older bodies could do, which was to flick out like that. This can do that as well, okay? But it does mean when I was in the plane and I was faffing about and it was cold and the wind taking my breath away, there was the odd moment where I sort of did something I didn't mean to because it has so much movement. So that's worth keeping in mind depending on where you're working. If you're doing something like weddings or whatever, I think that's gonna be absolutely fine. Or if you're in more of a controlled environment. But if you're, I don't know, trying to find something high resolution but you work on a ship, might be more annoying. So that's something to bear in mind. Also, something else, this is predominantly a stills camera, right? It has a great video spec, really nice video spec. You can do loads with it, and I did shoot some 8K footage up there, so we'll see if one of our Macs can deal with it. They might both blow up, so you might not ever see it, but hopefully you will. So that 8K footage, obviously that will allow you to crop into 4K. It's really nice, you can do a lot with it. What I would say is that even though we have the beautiful stills video S&Q slider here, so it's very easy to move between those three things, it doesn't keep your settings, which I don't, why? If you're in stills, if you're shooting Sony especially, realistically, if you're in video, you're gonna wanna shoot probably one of the picture profiles, right? So even if you're not shooting S-Log 2 or 3, you're gonna wanna maybe shoot a Cinetone, something like that, or even one of the movie ones, just something a little bit flatter to give you a bit more. You flick it back to stills, it still has that picture profile. I find that really annoying. It also held your shutter speed. So I'm on a plane, right? So if I'm in video, I was shooting obviously at the shutter speed, whatever, 50th, 100th, depending on what I was in. And then I moved back to stills. I don't want to be in a 50th or 100th. I want to be in like 2,000th of a second. And it was frustrating me. Now you do have custom things that you can set up. You know, you have 1, 2, and 3 up here. That's great. You can set those. But I just like it when cameras hold their settings between video and stills. It is a pet peeve of mine. However, you do have the ability to move between those very easily, which I do like. I think this works well, it fits my hand nicely. And I think if anything, it feels slightly bigger for me, and I have quite small hands, so I think that's probably gonna be a good fit for a lot of people. All in all, I would say it was very comfy to use, very easy to use, especially for the stills side of thing, and the autofocus worked fantastically well. And it has that thing that a lot of cameras can't do, that no matter what mode you're in, no matter what, you know, no matter if you're on single point, or if you've got tracking on, or if you're in wide focus mode and it's picking out what it needs to, when you press in that joystick on a Sony, it will automatically bring a point back to center. Even if you're in wide mode, right? And you don't have control of a point, you press that in, you get center focus. And on doing something like that, that was incredibly useful. I love that feature in Sony generally, and I have brought that up with a few other brands. I'm like, why don't you have this? I love it. But in that particular environment, that was very, very useful because you don't want to miss anything. You don't have long to get that shot. So all in all, there's always pros and cons with this type of camera because it's specialist, right? It's for specialist uses. But I love that. It was really, really great, and I cannot wait to see these on a big screen. It's a shame I'm not flying now, really, because that sunset is unreal. It's also really far away, and the cloud is not great, and there's no foreground, but there's pretty colours. So as a dedicated photographer, I must shoot them, regardless of the fact that the picture is mediocre at absolute best. 61 megapixels does give you a lot to work with. There's an incredible amount of resolution there. But the reality is that sometimes that can cause some downsides as well. So you can have things like at higher ISOs, a little bit more noise coming through. Now with this camera, we do have that backside illuminated sensor. Things are getting a little bit chillier now, we're losing the light. So James and I are gonna head along the coast to where he's staying tonight, gonna grab some food, wait for the sun to go down, then we're gonna head back out with this camera and do an ISO test. So you guys are completely aware of what this looks like in a bright sunny day when it's very good light, but also when things get a bit darker and you do have to boost those ISOs. So it's time to test the ISO range on the A7R V. Now, James is shooting me at the moment. He's using the FX3 and he's actually had to grab his phone light out because it is pitch black, which there's just like a lamp light. I mean, that is it, there's one lamp light. So we've set up here, we've got some nice brickwork, castle, there's some really dark areas, we can see some of the sky, and you have a lamp light. So some nice dynamic range in this shot, so you can really see what this is capable of. Now, I'm gonna start ISO 1600. I like starting about there because anything under that is absolutely fine. So ISO 1600 we'll start with. Use a 2-second timer so that we're good to go. And I'm just gonna check that, just make sure we're all good on settings. Everything's looking nice. Perfect. And that's pretty much clean as a whistle. So now we could just move upwards through that ISO range. So some of those much higher ISOs are actually a lot more usable than I thought they were going to be. And yes, all right, they might not have the most detail, it might not be the cleanest, but the point is, if you are in a situation with this camera where you need to capture the shot, whatever that is, like you and your super cute puppy having a nice moment on shoot, then you can do that, and that's the point. It's usable enough at those incredibly high ISOs. That picture is shot at 64,000, James?
Yes.
64,000. So, I mean, that is incredibly high on a 61 megapixel camera. I am super impressed, but we must do one more thing before we retire for the night, and that is to have the competition of handheld photography between me and James. I'm hoping at some point I'll do an actual proper voiceover. We can drop him for that rather than just me putting on a voice. Before we get started, let me explain to you the premise. So James and I are both going to take this camera. We're going to set it at the shutter speed that we think we can hold it steady for, and then we're going to hand hold that shot, but we only get 3 attempts. So you have to pick your first speed. If that you can't get still, then maybe you have to drop it on the next one, or if you hit that one, you can up it. So if you start at say 2 seconds and you hit that, then you can up it to 2.5 seconds and so on. So it's a bit of a competition to see not only who's got the steadiest hands, but also how well the image stabilization works in this camera. Okay, so I'm going to go ISO 500 and I'm going to start down at 3.2. So I'm not as confident, 60 megapixels, remember, so let's give it a go, right. Okay, let's see how that looks. All right, that's clean. Okay, so 3.2 is accomplished. Try number 2, I'm gonna go for 4 seconds, right. Oh, I felt like I swayed a little bit. I'm not out of breath by lifting the camera, I'm holding my breath. Even I'm not that unfit. Oh, there's a little bit of movement. Sugar. Right, 4 seconds again then. Right, ooh. I'm quite confident with that one. I'll be happy with 4 seconds on this camera. Oh, it's pretty clean. It is pretty clean. So 4 seconds, that's my entry. James, you'll go.
Okay, right, so now it's my go. So you were 4 seconds, so let's see if... I'm not going to start from 4 seconds because I'm not too sure on how well I'm going to be able to do this. So let's start a nice number, 2 seconds, and then I'm going to go from there. Again, we only get 3 attempts, so if I got to go for 2 seconds here. Okay. Okay, I felt good about that because I pressed it. Let's have a look. No, that is nice and sharp. It's really easy to see because there's so much detail in this castle. You can see even if you're slightly off, it's really, really visible. So I'm happy with 2 seconds. So what I'm going to do, I am going to try 3.2 seconds. So just going a little bit longer. See if I can try and do that. Let's have a look. Okay. Let's have a look. Okay.
No pressure.
That's nice and sharp. Okay. Now 4 seconds is definitely my limit. I haven't got the steadiest hands, but I guess you could say that's how good the IBIS is in this camera. 4 seconds handheld, 61 megapixels. That's gonna be impressive. Obviously, it's not, can't do this at every, you know, I wouldn't be able to do this at a wedding. I'm a little bit weirdo standing still for 4 seconds, but let's see if we can do this. Right, ready? Let's go for it. Okay, I definitely moved on that one, but did the IBIS help? No, no, it did not help. That is definitely blurry, but
so
fixable in post.
Who wins this, James?
So I think, I'm afraid, guys, Amy has won this round.
Yes! Right, I just want to have a couple more goes because I think I can actually get 1 second longer. So I'm just going to try 5 seconds, but without it being in the competition because I've already won that. That's sharp. 5 seconds. Okay, yeah. I mean, it takes a bit to do, but if you were in a situation where you forgot your tripod and something mad was going on in a landscape or an incredible piece of architecture, it's doable, and that is the main thing. This may have the same sensor that we've seen in the A7R IV, but there have been other upgrades to the processing unit, as well as the addition of the new AI chip, which will affect image quality. So it's not necessarily bad news, especially as the sensor in the A7R IV was fantastic. All in all, there are quite a few upgrades in the new A7R V. And if you'd like to find out more, then you can just check out our website using the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and join us again soon for some more videos from Wex Photo Video.